Daniel Carter had exactly 4 minutes to convince a surgeon not to kill his daughter, and the surgeon wasn't even looking at him. If you've ever stood in a hallway that smelled like bleach and fear, watching a man in scrubs check his watch while your whole world lay behind a set of double doors, then you already know how this story starts. And if you've ever had someone in a position of power dismiss you simply because you didn't have the right letters after your name, then stay with me until the end, because what happened next in that hospital corridor changed the way an entire surgical department operated. And it started with one exhausted single father who refused to be quiet. Before we go further, if stories like this move you, hit that like button and subscribe, because we've got so many more true-to-life stories waiting for you, and it helps us keep telling them. Daniel was 38 years old, and for the last 6 of those years, he had been both mother and father to a little girl named Lily. Her mother had left 2 Christmases after Lily was born, walked out on a Tuesday morning with 2 suitcases and a note that said she wasn't built for this life, and Daniel had never once let Lily see him fall apart about it. He worked as a foreman at a construction site on the edge of town, came home smelling like sawdust and diesel, and spent every evening doing multiplication tables and braiding hair he had learned to braid from YouTube videos watched at 2 in the morning. Lily was 7 now, a small, fierce, freckle-nosed girl who loved dinosaurs more than princesses and who had, 3 months ago, started fainting. It began small. She'd get dizzy on the playground, sit down hard, blink up at the sky like she'd forgotten where she was. Daniel had taken her to the pediatrician, who sent them to a cardiologist, who ran test after test after test, until finally a diagnosis arrived with a name too long for a 7-year-old to pronounce: a rare structural defect in one of the valves of her heart, something that had likely been there since birth, quietly worsening, finally making itself known. The cardiologist said surgery was the only real option, and the cardiologist said the best man for a case this delicate was a surgeon named Dr. Michael Reyes, chief of pediatric cardiac surgery at Ashford Memorial, a man whose name appeared in medical journals and whose waiting room was lined with framed thank you letters from grateful families. Daniel had done his research the way he did everything, thoroughly, at night, after Lily was asleep, sitting at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a laptop that was older than his daughter. He read every study he could find on her condition. He joined 3 different parent support forums for kids with congenital heart defects. And in the 3rd week of his research, at 2 in the morning, he found something that made his stomach drop. A small, recently published case study describing a handful of patients with Lily's exact defect who had experienced a dangerous, unexpected reaction to one specific class of anesthetic commonly used in pediatric cardiac surgery. The study was new. It hadn't made it into standard protocol yet, but the pattern was there in black and white. And once Daniel saw it, he could not unsee it. He brought it up at the very first consultation. He printed out the study, highlighted the relevant passages in yellow, and slid it across the desk toward Dr. Reyes with hands that were shaking, though he tried to hide it. Dr. Reyes was 52, silver at the temples, the kind of man who wore his confidence like a second white coat. He glanced at the papers for perhaps 4 seconds before sliding them back. "Mr. Carter," he said in the practiced, patient tone of a man who had given this exact speech many times before, "I understand you love your daughter and that Love is doing a lot of research for you tonight, but I've been doing pediatric cardiac surgery for 22 years. I've used this anesthetic protocol in hundreds of cases just like your daughter's. A single small study with a sample size that wouldn't fill this room is not going to change decades of successful practice." "But it's her exact defect," Daniel said. "The exact same one. 4 kids, 4 bad reactions, one of them nearly didn't make it. I'm not saying don't do the surgery, I'm asking if we can just talk to the anesthesiologist about an alternative." "I hear you," Dr. Reyes said, in a way that made it very clear he did not intend to hear him again. "But I need you to trust the process here. That's what I'm asking of every parent who sits in that chair. Trust the process." Daniel left that office feeling something he would spend weeks trying to name, and eventually he settled on it. He felt small. Not stupid, he knew he wasn't stupid, but small the way you feel when someone with more letters after their name decides your voice doesn't carry any weight in a room, even when the thing you're carrying might save your own child's life. He didn't let it go, though. That was the thing about Daniel, that his late father, a machinist who'd worked the same factory floor for 31 years, had drilled into him since he was a boy. When you know you're right about something that matters, you don't sit down just because someone with a nicer office tells you to. So Daniel kept researching. He called the university where the study had been published and, after being transferred 4 times, finally got 15 minutes on the phone with one of the actual authors, a cardiac anesthesiologist named Dr. Priya Nair, who was stunned that a construction foreman from 3 states away had tracked her down at all, and even more stunned by how well he understood her own research. She told him, gently but clearly, that if it were her child, she would ask for the alternative anesthetic protocol, or at minimum ask that the surgical team have specific reversal agents on hand and ready, just in case. Armed with that, Daniel requested a second consultation. He brought printouts of his phone call notes. He brought the direct quote Dr. Nair had given him permission to share. He brought every ounce of composure he had left, because he had promised himself he would not raise his voice, would not be the difficult parent, would not give this man any excuse to write him off as emotional and unreasonable. He sat across from Dr. Reyes and laid it all out calmly, and for one hopeful moment, he thought he saw something shift in the surgeon's face, a flicker of consideration. But then Dr. Reyes leaned back in his chair and said, "Mr. Carter, I've reviewed your daughter's file with my team. We are proceeding with the standard protocol. I understand you're scared. Every parent who walks through my doors is scared. But fear isn't a diagnosis, and it's not a treatment plan either. My team has this. Surgery is scheduled for Thursday morning." Whoa! Daniel wanted to scream. He wanted to demand a different surgeon, a different hospital, anything. But Ashford Memorial was the only facility in 300 miles equipped for a procedure this specialized. The wait list anywhere else was months long, and Lily's condition was worsening by the week. The fainting spells had become daily, and twice now she had woken up gasping in the middle of the night. There was no time to start over. There was no version of this where Daniel could simply walk away and find someone who would listen. He was trapped between a ticking clock and a closed door, and all he could do was show up on Thursday morning and hope that somewhere inside that operating room, someone would remember what he'd said. The morning of the surgery, Daniel knelt down in front of Lily in the pre-op room, her small body swallowed by a hospital gown 3 sizes too big, a dinosaur sticker someone had given her stuck crookedly to her wristband. "You know how brave you are?" he asked her, and she nodded solemnly, because he'd told her this every single day for the last month, until it had become a kind of prayer between them. "Braver than a T-Rex," she said, and he laughed even though his throat was closing up, and he kissed her forehead and told her he would be right there in the waiting room the whole time, and that when she woke up he would have her stuffed triceratops right there waiting for her. He caught the anesthesiologist on her way in, not Dr. Reyes, a younger woman named Dr. Sarah Voss, and he pressed one final printed page into her hands, the direct quote from Dr. Nair, the reversal agent recommendation circled in red pen. "Please," he said. "I know I'm probably the 5th overly anxious parent you've dealt with this week. I don't care. Please just read this before you start." Dr. Voss looked at the page. Something in her expression changed as she read it, not dismissal, but recognition. "I've actually seen this study," she said quietly. "I'll make sure the reversal agents are in the room." It wasn't a promise that anything would go according to Daniel's fears. It was just a small door left open. The kind of door that, in medicine, sometimes ends up mattering more than anyone in the room could have known. The surgery was scheduled to take 4 hours. Daniel sat in the waiting room with his phone face down on his knee because he couldn't stand to watch the seconds not moving, and a cup of coffee going cold beside him that he never once touched. 2 hours in, a nurse came out and told him things were progressing well, and he let himself breathe for the first time all morning. 3 hours in, nothing. He counted ceiling tiles. He replayed every conversation with Dr. Reyes in his head, wondering if there had been another way to say it, a way that would have actually landed. At the 3-hour and 40-minute mark, an alarm went off somewhere behind those double doors, distant but unmistakable, and Daniel's entire body went cold. He stood up so fast his coffee cup hit the floor. A nurse came rushing past him without stopping, and another, and the doors swung, and Daniel could hear raised voices now, urgent, clipped, the specific tone of a medical team responding to something they hadn't expected. What Daniel didn't know, what he would only learn afterward, pieced together from a shaking Dr. Voss and a much more subdued Dr. Reyes, was that exactly at the moment the standard anesthetic reached its critical dosage, Lily's small body reacted almost precisely the way the study had predicted. Her heart rate spiked violently, then began to destabilize in a way that, under ordinary circumstances, would have sent the entire surgical team scrambling to identify the cause from scratch, precious minutes lost while they diagnosed the emergency in real time. But Dr. Voss did not have to diagnose from scratch. She recognized the pattern instantly because she had read the page Daniel handed her only 40 minutes earlier. She called for the reversal agent by name before the monitor had even finished its second alarm cycle. It was already in the room, already drawn up, sitting on a tray exactly where she'd asked for it to be placed that morning, just in case. The team administered it within 90 seconds of the crisis beginning. Lily's heart rate steadied. The surgery, delayed by 20 tense minutes while the team stabilized her, resumed and was completed successfully. Dr. Reyes came out to the waiting room himself, still in his scrub cap, his hands still slightly unsteady, a version of a man Daniel had never seen before, not the composed authority from the consultation room, but someone who looked for the first time genuinely shaken. "Mr. Carter," he said, and it took him a moment to continue. "Your daughter is stable. The surgery was successful. She's in recovery now, and by every indication, she's going to be just fine." Daniel's knees nearly buckled with relief, but there was something in Dr. Reyes's face that made him wait, made him not just collapse into gratitude yet. "There was a complication," Dr. Reyes continued, choosing each word carefully. "A reaction to the anesthetic. The exact reaction you described to me. If Dr. Voss hadn't had the reversal agent already prepared and ready, if she hadn't recognized what was happening the instant it started, we would have lost several critical minutes. Minutes your daughter did not have to spare." He paused, and something in his throat worked before he spoke again. "You were right. I dismissed you twice, and you were right. And your daughter is alive right now in part because you refused to stop pushing." It would be easy to end the story there, with the neat, satisfying justice of a proud father vindicated and a humbled surgeon admitting his mistake. But real life rarely wraps up quite that cleanly, and the truest part of what happened at Ashford Memorial came in the weeks that followed, not in that one hallway confrontation. Lily recovered beautifully. Within 10 days she was home, sitting on the living room floor surrounded by plastic dinosaurs, informing her father with great seriousness that the Triceratops was, in fact, the strongest dinosaur, stronger even than the T-Rex, no matter what anyone said. Daniel sat on the floor with her every evening that week, savoring an ordinariness he had feared. For a few terrifying hours he might never get back. But something else happened too. Dr. Reyes requested a meeting, not with Daniel, but with the hospital's surgical review board, where he presented Lily's case in full, including his own initial dismissal of the parent-supplied research. It was, by all accounts, an uncomfortable meeting for a man used to being the most respected voice in any room he entered. But he did it anyway. Within 2 months, Ashford Memorial's Pediatric Cardiac Surgery Department had updated its intake protocol. Every family would now be asked, explicitly and in writing, whether they had found any relevant medical literature during their own research, and that literature would be formally logged, reviewed by an anesthesiology consult, and either incorporated or specifically ruled out with documented reasoning, not simply waved away in a 5-minute consultation. Dr. Reyes and Daniel spoke once more, months later, at a follow-up appointment that had turned out to be entirely unnecessary from a medical standpoint. Lily's heart was healing perfectly, but that Dr. Reyes had asked for anyway. "I've been doing this for 22 years, he told Daniel sitting across from him in the same office where he had once slid Daniel's printed research back across the desk. "And somewhere in those 22 years, I stopped hearing parents as anything other than noise between me and the operating room. I want you to know that's not who I want to be anymore. Your daughter taught me that, even though she doesn't know it." Daniel didn't need the apology, not really. He'd already gotten the only thing he'd ever actually wanted, which was walking out of that hospital with his daughter breathing on her own, asking if she could have chicken nuggets for dinner. But he accepted it anyway, because he understood something Dr. Reyes was only beginning to understand himself, that expertise and humility were never supposed to be opposites, that the years of training which made a surgeon brilliant should have made room for the one thing a scared, sleep-deprived single father in a Carhartt jacket could offer that no medical degree could replace. He knew his daughter completely, and he had never once stopped fighting for her. Lily is 9 years old now. She still thinks the Triceratops is the strongest dinosaur, and Daniel has stopped arguing the point. She has a thin scar on her chest that she shows off at swim lessons like a badge of honor, and she has started, quietly and without any prompting from her father, telling other kids at the hospital's family support group that her daddy saved her life before the doctors ever touched her. Daniel corrects her gently every single time. The doctors saved her life, he tells her. Dr. Voss and the whole surgical team saved her life. But privately, in the quiet moments after she's fallen asleep, he lets himself believe that maybe it took both. Maybe it took a surgeon skilled enough to hold a 7-year-old's heart in his hands, and a father stubborn enough to make sure that surgeon was listening when it mattered most. If there's one thing this story asks of you, it's this: trust yourself when you know something matters, even when the person across the desk from you has more letters after their name. Expertise deserves respect, but love, attention, and the fierce, specific knowledge that only comes from sitting beside someone through every sleepless night, that deserves a seat at the table too. Daniel Carter never went to medical school. He learned everything he knew about his daughter's heart from library books, late-night phone calls, and a father's refusal to be quiet. And in the end, that knowledge was the thing that mattered most. If this story moved you even a little, don't scroll past without hitting like and subscribing. It helps this channel keep bringing you stories about parents, kids, and the quiet, ordinary courage that saves lives in ways no headline ever captures. We'll see you in the next one.